Welcome to Show Me the Mommy, the podcast where we explore the stories of local moms, business owners, and fascinating individuals in Southeast Missouri. We are your hosts, Laura,
Rory, and Kelly.
Join us as we engage in conversations that cover a variety of topics, from parenting to entrepreneurship and everything in between. This is Show Me the Mommy. Let's dive in with our next guest, Ellen Gibson, a registered dietitian, fitness instructor, and owner of Square One Wellness. She is also the author of 2 cookbooks and is here to talk all things baby-led weaning and health promotion. Hello, Ellen.
Hi. Hey, Ellen. We're so glad you're here. Will you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, I am a registered dietitian, and I am also a mom, and I have 2 kids, a husband, and I have a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Fun ages.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Depends on the day.
Yeah. Right. No, they're great. It's fine. They're my inspiration for all of my work, mostly.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Awesome.
And can you explain to us what baby-led weaning is?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I teach my workshop classes, this is the class question I always ask my dads that are at the class, because they're like, I don't know, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. Why am I here on a Saturday? Like, what would you do if a stranger asked you what is baby-led weaning? So my formal definition of that is it's the introduction of nutritious whole foods when baby shows interest, and then signs of readiness to self-feed. So then they're included in the family meal, which is our long-term goal, is that how do we get our babies to be from babies to people that eat what the rest of the family does.
Okay. And then typically, what are the signs that you know that your baby is ready to introduce this type of?
Yeah, absolutely. I get that question a lot. And it's really kind of a whole collection of signs of readiness that you're looking for. It's not just one thing. It's definitely not just age. There's a lot of, we have to think of eating as another developmental milestone. So like rolling over and crawling and walking and that kind of stuff, that around a certain window of time, a baby's going to be ready. Most are. But there's really some flex time with that. So we're looking for things like, are they sitting up well? Do they have good trunk control? Do they have a tongue thrust, which is if they put something in their mouth, do they instantly spit it out back? That's just an innate reflex that they're born with. That usually goes away around 6 months. Are they grasping things with good hand control, like they see your phone and they can grab it because they want it, or your hair they want to pull. So their brain is telling their hands really what to do, and they're doing that with intention. And then you're also looking for really an interest in food. There's kind of a moment, a surreal moment when you've been able to eat around your babies their whole life and they don't even notice, and all of a sudden one day they like look at you and what are you doing? And they'll literally like,
want some of that.
Attack you for food, and you're like, I've never given you, don't know what this is. So that really, that interest, that mental connection. So the stars kind of have to align, and then baby's ready. And we talk about that in all the classes that I offer, to kind of put them all together. And then there's many times that they're meeting all of those, and they're still just, babies are totally different one day to the next. They're not doing anything, then all of a sudden they learn that skill, and then they just do that forever. So it's really about giving them that opportunity to be successful and know how to eat, or the opportunity that it doesn't register, that they can't quite get the food to their mouth. But usually around 6 months, most babies are able to sit upright, pick up pieces of food, bring them to their mouth, move it around, chew it, and swallow. And so they really can feed themselves.
Okay.
Is there an age that tends to be?
Usually around 6 months.
6 months, okay.
Yeah, give or take. I mean, if someone was born a little bit premature, you're going to add those weeks on. But the window's pretty large. They don't recommend, the Academy of Pediatrics recommends no foods besides breast milk or formula until that 6-month point. So
Okay.
I get lots of questions. My baby's 5 months. I think they're ready.
I blame our parents.
Yeah.
Rice cereal.
That's the biggest influencer. And I'm like, you think they're ready, but they're not. They may be meeting a lot of those signs, but they're really, and it's for their own safety to wait, and for their own nutrition, that we just don't need to fill their bellies up on other things besides breast milk or formula, because it's not nutritionally equivalent.
So I think I'm still a little confused on what baby-led weaning is, because I've heard so many different things. Some people say it's to help them chew, like to be more, like have a more open diet. But you're just saying it's to make them prepared to eat with you as in the family group?
It can be a lot of different things.
Be super simple. Talk to me like I'm a child.
Dumb it down.
Okay. So really all what you're doing is that you're skipping any baby food. You're waiting until they're about 6 months old, and then you're offering them food from the family table. And
Okay.
anything that goes in their mouth, they pick it up, they bring it to their mouth themselves. You're never feeding them at any point in the
No
process.
purees.
No purees. I mean, some foods may be naturally pureed, like if you're eating applesauce and the rest of the family is, that's fine to do. Or if we're having like tomato soup, I'm not pureeing that tomatoes on purpose, but if we're eating tomato soup, then my baby can have that too. So they're really just to be a part of the family meal. They're actively self-feeding. Their goal is that their food is the same as ours at all points. So then as a family, you have to consider, am I eating foods regularly that I feel comfortable sharing with my baby? Am I eating nutrient-dense foods, healthy foods that I want to share with my baby? And so it gives parents a good time to reassess their own diet, because we can all make those steps to eat a little bit healthier, to have more fruits and vegetables, to have more protein and good healthy fats in our diet. So having that baby, your world's turned upside down and you don't know what's happening anyway. So you might as well start on a new page, including the baby in the family meal, and then eating nutritious foods that you can also share with your baby, which is super fun too.
So what's the major benefit of it? Why do people do it?
The big selling points really is it's super developmentally appropriate. It's what the Academy of Pediatrics recommends. So it's very healthy. It's not a new thing that like I just invented like this concept. When you talk back to like grandmas and great grandmas, it's what everybody did. Like, yeah, when you could eat, you could eat. And so you just started grabbing things off the table and to fend for yourself. So it's, but one of the main pieces is that they're learning to eat whole foods right from the start. So their food never has to switch. All of a sudden, traditional feeding maybe that it's in a container, in a package, and this is the baby's things. And then they have that eagerness to take stuff from the rest of the family, but we kind of shut them down. We're like, nope, this is not your food. This is mommy's food. But while they have that eagerness, we want to foster that and say, yeah, anything that we're eating, you can be a part of. So we want them to like visually learn, like, what does food look like? When I have this big red juicy ball and I put it to my mouth, it's going to explode and have tomato flavor to it. And so that's going to be completely unique than another food that would be maybe like this pile of slimy green stuff. It's going to taste like spinach. And we have to use those individual foods to help them learn like what the flavor is going to taste like. That spinach doesn't normally taste like applesauce, and it shouldn't have things blended together, to highlight that some foods are bitter, some foods are sweet, so they can learn visually what foods look like, because everything they put into their mouths when babies, they're trying to learn about it anyway.
Right.
So anytime we can get their hands moving, then anytime their hands are working, their brains are working. So it's a whole educational learning process for the kids. It's like we don't do lots of arts and crafts in my home, but our food exploration and sensory is that our like
They finger paint with their food.
it's our craft time. Yeah, I would much rather clean up a food mess than like actual chemicals. So
Right.
yeah, because
Do you feel like baby-led weaning helps with picky eaters, or not so much?
yeah, absolutely. It very much can be a preventative piece for that. And that's a big selling point for a lot of families. They're trying to, okay, I want to prevent picky eating. I actually have a lot of parents themselves that are really picky, and they're like, I don't want them to be like I am. So we're really introducing a lot of textures, and not complicated textures early on, but like the thickness. In my first class, they can choose either a sweet potato or an avocado. Those are not like thick, like we're not giving them tortilla chips on day one. But the thickness of that, the viscosity of that is still much more thicker than like a stage 1 baby food. So we're learning that, that things have textures. Anything that goes in their mouth is going to require some chewing, some manipulation, not a lot, but that requires their jaws to move around. So it's actually preventative to help with their speech development. Those mouth muscles are really becoming exercised. And so that they're getting textures from day one. It's going to require some chewing. And then we're also giving them lots of flavors. We can season their food. There's no rules that you can't season food. So we want to highlight those herbs and things like that, to put that there's always, maybe there's rosemary or parsley or lemon or garlic in their food. You can put cumin, warm spices. We want to keep away from like really spicy stuff. I always tell people, just pretend like you're cooking for company. So like if you're like crazy hot people, don't do that with your baby early on. But I mean, if they're going to fit into your family, then they're going to get used to it. So it's really just a chance to explore. And then the main thing is really to making meal times like not pressured, that it's not a big deal. Food is never, there's a really good book called Kid Food. And it's one of the quotes that I put in my presentations is that eating is not a big deal unless a big deal is made of eating. So really just, we talk about the division responsibility, how to prevent those like mealtime battles and struggles. That shouldn't even be happening. So how to kind of go around that without that ever becoming a thing.
Right. What would you say to moms that are interested in baby-led weaning, but maybe they're a little bit nervous about like choking or something like that?
Yeah, we absolutely. So I have 2 classes. We have an introduction to baby-led weaning class that I talk about, and we talk about more like the feeding philosophy, the big picture of what food looks like. And then we get down to the nitty gritty of like gagging and choking and food allergies and stuff in my first food workshop. So really the more educated you can be on what it looks like, what is gagging, what does choking look like, how to be preventative. So we break that down. We have some videos we watch and what are the normal sounds of gagging on food versus choking. I would say to a mom that's worried about that, absolutely come and reach out and attend a class so we can talk through that. So you can talk to other moms about that and to really be educated. I tell all my families to get a CPR certification either way, just to walk your brain through that worst case scenario of whether it's not with food necessarily, but there's so many things that kids put in their mouth.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, I pull.
They're like little vacuum cleaners.
My son like daily has rocks in his mouth. And he's like, oh, thanks, buddy. And he gives me a mouthful of rocks. I'm like, okay. So it's going to happen. There's just lots of things that they walk around with and they put in their mouth. And they're just learning, like I said. But really, we focus on having a designated eating location. So with this concept that, yes, it's also a designated mess location. We don't walk around with food. But when we're in the high chair, that is their one goal. And they can get super focused. And they're putting everything in their mouth. And their number one intent is like, I'm going to get this in my mouth. I'm going to chew on it. I have a video of my daughter like picking up corn on the cob and her hands are shaking. She's so excited. And she's like, and it's just all the sloppy sounds and stuff like that. But she's so invested. She's doing it. She's in control. So if we can keep the distractions to minimal, a lot of times instances, the ones I hear in conversations of kids choking on foods is maybe they're up running around, they're sitting on somebody's lap and they're getting bounced around, or they had food in their mouth and somebody picked them up and they didn't realize there was still food. So really having that safe designated eating location where that's their purpose there. Babies only eating in that one spot. We're not eating on the go, running around. And even when they get in the toddler age, really having a designated, like we have a rug where he sits in the kitchen where, yes, you can get up and move, but if you're going to eat, you have to sit here. We're not going to run around the house with food because I don't want to mess. I don't want to find Cheerios in my living room, or I don't want you to be choking if you fall and trip and you have something in your mouth. It's really not safe. So yeah, we talk a lot about safety for sure.
Okay. But is there a difference between choking and gagging?
Yeah.
Because I did the whole baby-led weaning, and I will say the gagging is, and it looks like choking though. Mm-hmm. It looks like choking when they're gagging.
Yeah. So there are some key signature pieces that are different, but really, and every baby has a different gag reflex. Some are super sensitive and some are not so much. But we talk about the education point. So at around that 6 months when they're just starting, their gag sensitivity reflex is really sensitive, and it's on purpose for protection. So when we think we gag on something, we're like, oh my gosh, it's all the way deep in their throat and they're going to stop breathing soon. That's not necessarily the case. When the baby's around 6 months old, their gag reflex is triggered more towards the middle of their tongue. So that's simply their brain telling them, hey, you've never swallowed anything solid before. You got to do that one more time. So they just move the unchewed food simply from the middle of their tongue to the front of their tongue, and then they try again. Babies are typically not fazed by this. They make a lot of noise. Their eyes will water and they'll sputter, and it's like, it sounds real dramatic, but it doesn't usually faze them. I always take away the plate.
Sounds terrible. I mean, it is a full like retch.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like terrible. And I'm like, oh my God, bang it on them.
So you don't want to overreact for sure. And it's not recommended. Don't sweep in their mouth. Like, don't try to claw it out. That's really not safe. Whoops. Yeah. But yeah. So the biggest thing is really to stay calm. If nobody like jumps up and slams the table, because there could be something unsafe in their mouth that makes them swallow if you scare them. Right. But we talk about intentionally, like, okay, when babies around 6 months, they start doing that like fake cough thing. They think it's really cute.
Oh yeah.
And so to intentionally teach them when they do that fake cough, tell them what that is. That's coughing. And then like I make everybody in the family like, we're all coughing right now because baby's coughing, to show them what they need to learn how to do that. And then also to teach them to use some coaching terms. We intentionally teach them how to spit things out when they have, whether it's rocks in their mouth, or my son had a live stink bug in his mouth one day, or there's like,
oh my gosh.
Thank you. Or whether it is food that I need you, that's a big, that bite that's too big, to intentionally, okay, spit it out. Okay, we're all going to show you this is what mommy means, because you don't want the first time you to ask them to spit something out for it to be an emergent situation. So you just have to kind of run your brain through that to practice.
So like a preventative situation.
Kind of like a fire drill.
Right.
Like you want to practice it before.
And what age is this? What kind of kids do you have? What age is
I
this?
missed the mark.
Yeah. What age are you teaching them that?
Yeah, you can start, right away at that 6 months, because they're just trying to copy anything that you do from that point forward. I mean, they're not going to mimic it, but just so they've seen that and be able to do that.
I got a 17-month-old, and I think she'd just look at me like,
yeah.
No.
Babies can really do a lot.
Negative.
When you they can start communicating, like we start with, we teach infant sign language in the class, and they can start doing that around 10 months with their signing more and eat and stuff like that. So they can really do a lot. I just depends.
She's
so
slow. Yeah.
It's on the mark. She just chooses not to.
I don't know. We're going to find out. I told her if she keeps it up, she's going to have to go to therapy. She's going to have to get speech therapy.
So I do see kids for that too. I do work with first steps.
I'll introduce you to Lucy. See how this
She will
goes.
rock your world.
I don't know. I do a lot of early intervention stuff. So I see kids on very opposite spectrums. I have these parents that are like, what's the very best thing I could absolutely do? And I have other parents that I'm like, please set a reminder on your phone to feed your child today, because they don't feed them at all.
Oh,
So
no, she's a great eater and all that, but yeah, she had other issues kind of growing up. So her, let's talk about kids that do have some other issues. So she had a very hypotonic nature. She had a hard time doing her hands and stuff like that. So it was all great in theory, but if you can't pick it up and put it in your mouth, what do you do? And that maybe has stuff like that has probably put her back a couple months because everything's kind of waking up.
Oh, yeah.
I'm also convinced she doesn't have taste buds because she loves coleslaw. Like, I'm convinced she can't taste correctly.
Oh.
So coleslaw, spinach salads, I mean,
Yeah.
things kids should not love.
that means you did it right.
No, I don't think so. Because
That can't be it.
no, because I have a friend, and I want to ask you your expert opinion.
Okay.
Because I have a friend who did all of the same things I did, right? Lucy, very easy.
Yeah.
Ate spinach, like no big deal. Just look at you, yum, yum, yum. All good. She did the same thing. He gags a little more. He chokes a little more, that kind of stuff. Both toddlers now. Lucy will eat anything in the world. I mean, anything, which is why I'm convinced she doesn't have taste buds. Yeah. He is getting very, very, very particular about food, very controlling around food. Only wants spaghetti now. We both did the same thing. How did one toddler end up this way and one toddler end up this way?
Well, they have very different personalities, and usually food is one of the first ways, the avenues that kids can exert any independence. And so they usually take food out that pretty easy way, like they got to go to bed.
It was a control thing. It was like this kid's trying to control you.
So that could be one thing. And their personalities are totally different. I have babies come in at 6 months old, and they're like, and they just want to smash the food. And then I have little girls that are like, and they'll sit there for half an hour. And then the other mom is like, this is not fair. What are they doing? So just like, okay, one baby sleeps all night and this baby doesn't until they're a year and a half. Babies are really different because they're completely different people. So we can't have the same expectations. But we also talk about, and so their taste buds are going to be different. They have different preferences in food, things like that. But there are some strategies that we talk about in class, like the division of responsibility of when you have those really strong-willed children, on how to navigate that and not making meal times a big deal. It could be a phase, probably. Everything with a kid is a phase, because one day they're this, and then the next day they're a different human, and then they're a different person.
Oh, yeah.
So really, how do you navigate that as a parent? There are some things we can't let our kids be in charge of. We don't ask our kids like, okay, do you want to play in the street today, or do you want to play in your yard? So we can't give that option. So a lot of times we that's a really big decision, and they don't understand the whole spectrum of safety and things like that. And so that we really can't let kids decide, do you want to eat? Where do you want to eat at today? What do you want to eat? Because they don't understand their nutrient needs. So we have to, as our job as a parent, it's to decide what our kids eat, where our kids eat, and when our kids eat. Okay, and there's a lot more detail that can go into that. But then a child's role is to decide, of the foods that was offered, how much of those foods are they going to eat, and if or all they're going to eat any of that food. Okay, but they're not, they can't menu plan. They don't understand carbohydrates and protein and fat and nutrition, nutrient deficiencies and things like that. So there's some decisions in food that children can't make because they're two, and like they just don't, they can't read. They don't know they don't know a lot. And so how to work around what's our responsibility and what's their responsibility. They very much are responsible in the mealtime of what goes in their mouth. We're not going to sit and negotiate. You take a bite and then I'll do this. And if you take 2 bites, then you get this. How to avoid that, because then we're transferring power and control, and it's not something that is going to be beneficial for them in the long run.
How do you avoid that?
Well, hey, yeah, and very specifically, if you've
How
got
much time do you have?
if you've got a mom going through that, and they've got in the tantrums and everything else, I don't think this kid's going to negotiate on. It's not that. It's, if I don't get it, I'm about to scream for 3 hours, right? If I don't get what I want on this plate, I'm going to scream for 3 hours. If I don't get it cut up the way I want it, I'm gonna scream for 3 hours. So what's like 3 things that very, very practical things a mom can do to kind of try to pull them out of there or start getting them back on track?
Yeah, I mean, from day one, like I said, we have that division of responsibility. But anytime we need to interject with discipline, that's a whole separate behavior of not related to what they're eating. So you may need to just revisit where is that behavior coming from and establish what's okay behavior and what's not. Because in those toddler years, they have clear comprehension of what they're doing a lot of times. So you have to establish maybe this is just not okay. You need to take a break from the table and reassess and figure out what you're doing in your parenting concept.
You think? I don't think my toddler has comprehension of like that she's they see red. They just go like
Right.
yeah.
Right. So it probably has nothing to do with the food, and it may, but it may not. So a lot
She's
of times,
controlling you.
right?
Maybe.
There's a response that's happened though. When I do this, there's a response that happens. So a lot of my families, okay, we were talking about this on Saturday. The child refuses to eat at the mealtime. They just sometimes take her out. Okay, now it's bath time. We're going to get ready for bed, and then a lot of times the child's mind just kind of resets, and then they say, oh yeah, they are hungry because they're not mad or whatever thing that was causing them stress earlier, it's been forgotten about. And then they can go back to the table after that nap or after that bath and start kind of afresh. And so think about how do you handle those behaviors? Whether they were sitting at the kitchen table acting like that, or you were in church or at a store. As a parent, you need to have some kind of strategy. What do I do when my child acts like this? And then figure that out. But that would be a whole nother class on child behavior, particularly. Another strategy you can use is to offer something at each meal that the child really does like, something that's a familiar favorite, so that everything is not completely new and foreign. So that there's something that, okay, you don't want to eat this other food? Absolutely. But here's something that I know you do enjoy. And then they have that, like in the division of responsibility, they have that ability to eat as little or much of all the foods offered. So there's no pressure that you don't have to eat.
So she's tried that, and he'll go for the thing he wants and then screams if he doesn't get more of it. So
Well, you could give him more.
just keep giving more of what he wants. Like if he'll only eat spaghetti, you just give the spaghetti all the time.
No.
Oh.
The adult is in charge of what is served at that meal,
Right.
each meal.
So she'll give him a bunch of stuff that he, whatever. But but one thing he likes, so the spaghetti's on there,
Right.
with all the other stuff.
Right.
But he'll just eat the spaghetti and then scream for more spaghetti.
Yeah, if that's what he wants, if that's being offered at that meal, then he can have as little or much as he likes. If he only wants spaghetti at that meal and doesn't want the other stuff, that's fine. But we're not going to make spaghetti the next day just because he only eats spaghetti.
Okay. So if he just
Switch it up.
stays in the 5 things, then just let it happen.
I mean, it takes a lot of time to see. And so like with my first steps work that I do, I go to the home, and there's always usually a lot of other elements involved in why that child's acting like that at meal times. And it's rarely the food that's being offered. There's a lot of other environmental or relationship, what the parent's doing. A lot of my really problematic eaters, usually the mom or someone in the family has really strong issues with food themselves. And they don't eat.
Not the case.
She
loves food. They're foodies.
So-
they can't understand. There's something so
Yeah, it just depends. So it takes some good hands-on. So I've had lots of clients where I've just go to their home. I have to see. I can't. And I
Right.
have to watch. And so I'll watch several of their meal times. Okay, here's some issues what I see. And then the more you can get a kid involved in the kitchen, the better. So my kids cook
That's
for
what
me
she's
from
going to
day
try
one.
now. So
Yes.
she's getting them fake knives and all that kind of stuff.
So
Okay.
we do that. So my son, like I said, he's 2 and he's been whisking the eggs for a long time now. And that's his job. When we're cooking, he always has to have something that he can do because big sister's next to me. She's cutting up veggies and stuff. So to do something, and typically with kids, we just let them eat. We just let them cook with us. Like, okay, we're making cookies. That's the thing you help with. And so then they're really excited about that. But we need to figure out ways to let them help us with all meals. So even sometimes when I'm cooking my daughter from pretty much 2 and up, I would give her a little cutting board, and then the ends of whatever things I'm making, I just give her random pieces. Okay, here's some mushrooms, here's some zucchini, whatever. She can just chop and play and do her own little thing while I'm cooking. She's not necessarily helping me because that would slow me down. I can't, spend 2 hours making a meal, but I just give her random little things to do.
Again. Second time.
And so that they are part of the regular meals, that not everything is going to be cookie dough, but guess what? I need you to help me with the salad. Can you go outside and pick the herbs? Anything they can do with food that's non-pressured, playing with food, playing with pretend food, cooking with food, playing like a little chef. So I would ask her to get like kids' toys and to play cooking where the child has no obligation to eat or anything. even with the pretend food, or you can use it with real food. Just the more you can interact with food and touch food, and realize that it's, that natural curiosity might come about, that what does this look like? What's it smell like? And ask them to explore their food, but never ask them to eat it or make them eat it. Yeah. And so we're not going to change our menu specifically based on what our kids like. You're going to intentionally, yes, make things that everybody likes, but there could be, their taste buds are changing and they're developing all the time. So always giving them a chance to eat something brand new, but they need to see it for a while to know that, this is fine. Everybody else is eating it, and that it's not a big pressure if they do or they don't. Either way, we don't really want to put a certain food on a pedestal, like, bravo, you ate broccoli, but then like, don't eat very much mac and cheese. That's our own
problems.
Pushing it on them. They don't know any of that. They don't need to know any of that. That all the food that we made, they can just trust their mom that everything that mom made me is for my own nourishment, and that I should be able to enjoy and love and be excited that she made for me. That we're not, here's this, but there's all these rules around on how much you can eat it. That makes them really stressful. So we want meal times as positive and as optimistic as possible. But having a safe food is a good way to start. And so they can eat a little bit of that. And if they want more of that food, then absolutely can continue to have more.
And when you're introducing those foods, and we're talking about like at the 6-month mark, and we're worried about food allergies. So how should we approach that?
Yeah, so we break that down. There are actually 9 of the most common food allergies to watch for. And so I tell my parents to, a typically allergic reaction doesn't occur the first time. It's usually around the 3rd or 4th time of exposure, and they can just continue to compound. So we want to intentionally offer, the recommendations are early and regular introduction of food allergies is the key to prevention. So at that 6-month point, we want to introduce all of the food allergies, all 9 of those foods with intention.
Which is a big change, right? Because it used to be, don't ever do that.
Right. And so, there's a whole generation with a lot of food allergies because the recommendation is to wait until after they're 2 years old.
Why are we all allergic to peanut butter? Is that what happened?
Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely. And so, more research has shown that, the longer we wait to introduce these food allergens to our babies, the higher chance of having a food allergy. So there's studies that show, a 6-month, I don't know the specific numbers of this percentage it's going to have. And then if you wait till 9 months, then this percentage of kids have food allergies.
I did it all wrong.
Well, no, that's what everybody told us.
I know. Yeah.
Right. So science changes. And so there has to be those kind of like, whoops.
Yeah.
We're learning more about this, but now, yes. So early introduction. And so they've both done most of the research on peanuts, but they're applying, if the things have been successful with the peanut allergies, they're applying them to the other allergens. So, so intentionally offer them 2 or 3 times independently. So if you have, you make scrambled eggs, you normally put milk in it. Don't do that for the first 3 or 4 times because you won't know if the reaction's to milk or to eggs. So isolate those allergens for about 24 hours. Usually a food allergy shows up within the first 10 minutes to 2 hours is going to be a pretty close window of that it really being a food allergy. So we talk about what does those signs look like? What are the hives and the rashes? Do they have chronic eczema? My son actually had a food allergic reaction and came back positive for milk and dairy at 6 months. And we just kind of threw it all in because I'm like, I know what I'm doing. I did all the things to prevent the food allergies that you can do because breastfeeding is a primary recommendation for food allergy prevention. The main thing that you can do to prevent food allergies from happening because they're getting a little bit of all those allergens the whole time through breast milk. So even with that, they can still have food allergies. So he was allergic to milk and eggs. But we did some science and research and figuring out what parts of these specific proteins is he allergic to and what can he tolerate. So actually we kept continuing offering dairy with an allergist in St. Louis. And he outgrew it by 18 months. So he can have all the milk and dairy he wants.
Wow. Okay.
So it's not about 60 to 80% of kids with a milk or an egg allergy outgrow it by the time they're 16. But parents have to take that proactive approach that it's not a diagnosis forever. It doesn't have to be that you can work with it.
So if you have a parent that's, let's say, allergic to peanuts, does that child have a greater risk of being allergic to peanuts?
Not necessarily from a parent to a child. Now, if a sibling has a specific food allergy, then they do have a higher risk. But then it becomes a complication of, how allergic is the parent? Can they still prepare those foods for the child to help in the allergy prevention? So maybe that you do it like mom may have to leave the house, but you really want to still offer those foods. I've had some moms tell me that, okay, I fed my kid shrimp in the parking lot of the hospital because just in case she was so scared about a food allergic reaction happening.
I've seen that.
Okay, that's an option. So whatever you're comfortable with, but I take it on the preventative side almost as intentional. This is my case study that I'm working towards. I don't want to be surprised by a food allergy, so I'm going to make sure that all my kids were being introduced to all these foods on purpose with the checklist on intention. Okay, you've had hazelnuts 4 times, you've had shrimp 4 or 5 times, so I know, and then you have to regularly introduce. You don't just give them shrimp when they're 6 months old and then don't have it until they're 12, because a lot can change in the body by then. So that regular, it's kind of like a tiny little vaccine. Every time they eat that food, their body remembers what response it's supposed to have to that food.
Right. Okay.
What advice would you have to a mom that's a little bit overwhelmed by baby-led weaning?
So come to a class, reach out to me. I could do online classes for the introduction version. I like to do small group sessions so that we can talk like this. And this mom's like, I have this question. That mom's like, that's the same thing I was worried about. So I like to connect real people with real people. So I offer them monthly, once a month in Cape, and people can come and really talk through. And so I can say, okay, you have this issue. Let's work through your schedule. Let's work through your schedule. So I would just tell them to find somebody who's been successful. When you post things and ask questions, you usually get the negative responses, and they're like, Dad, or, really extreme circumstances. And so don't just blast it out for the whole world, but try to ask through people who's done it successfully. What's my best resource? And so I get tagged a lot, and I love that. And I'm like, you really have to come to class so we can all talk through all of the things. But to be informed, a lot of my moms, that if they're not locally, they haven't done an online class. This baby-led weaning baby food cookbook, it is a cookbook, but
Show it up.
Oh, okay.
That camera right there.
Yeah. So the beginning of it is kind of a how-to baby-led weaning manual. So I always tell my parents, you need to buy the cookbook anyway, but it is a take-home portion of the manual. So you can and it's going to have more specific details than what I can cover. I can't talk, for 5 hours in class. It's usually 2 hours though. So it's a lot, but it's going to have a lot more specific things, and they can refer back to this. Okay, what did she say about that day?
Right.
And then they can use that as their manual. But I would reach out, the more informed you can be of, okay, that gagging's going to happen. It's okay. This is why their development, that gag reflex will change as they get older. It's okay for that to be happening. So learning what's okay, what to expect. It's going to be messy, how to work around those strategies. So the more education you can get, the better. And then finding someone that has been really successful and say, okay, clean shirt, what did you do? How did you do this?
Right. And where can they find you for these classes?
Yeah. So all my classes are all listed on Eventbrite. That's where you buy your registration links and stuff like that. They're on SEMO events. And then my website is squareonewellness.net. You can also have a link to the registration of the classes. I have Facebook, I have Instagram, or just word of mouth. SEMO moms will direct you to me eventually.
Yes. I've probably tagged you 100 times, I'm sure. So
yeah, and so it's really funny because sometimes I get a message from a mom, and then I want to do the classes, and then I don't hear anything about it, and then it comes around, 18 months, 2 years later, they're like, okay, now I'm really coming because I just had another kid, and I'm really going to do this again. And I look back, I'm like, oh yeah, we had a whole conversation about you were coming, but it didn't happen. So now they're like, okay, I got to do this.
yes.
So, no, I love it. Thanks for
Perfect.
helping
Thanks
me.
so much for being here.
Yeah.
We're so excited.
Find us on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Show Me the Mommy Podcast.
And our website
Is smtmpodcast.com.
Yes, follow us, like, comment, review, share. The more that we get, the better guest and content we can produce. So thanks so much. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Hey guys, thanks for watching this episode from Show Me the Mommy Podcast. Go ahead and follow us on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at Show Me the Mommy Podcast. You can keep up to date with every episode we release and new guests that are coming our way. See you guys soon.